The shrimp never hit the floor. That's the part that haunts me most. It just sat there on her fork, shaking slightly as her laugh echoed across the candlelit table. One of those open-mouthed, performative laughs. The kind that invites others to join in. The kind that needs an audience. And she had one. Her sister. Her coworkers. That guy with the expensive watch who always overpronounced Merlot. And me. Sitting at the edge of the table, pretending to smile, knowing exactly what she was about to say before she said it. You know what he asked me last week? He asked if I still love him. Can you believe that? He literally scheduled it on our shared Google Calendar. Like it was a dentist appointment. Tuesday, 6 p.m. Ask wife if feelings still exist. I can't. Laughter. I watched the candle flicker near the breadbasket. Thought about how many times I'd told myself she was just sarcastic. That she had a dark sense of humor. That I was overreacting. But the moment that shrimp stopped shaking, and her fork lowered, and her eyes locked onto mine, that's when I knew. She wanted me to break. Not in private. In front of everyone. So I didn't. Not then. Not when they moved on to jokes about the waiter's accent. Not when her hand brushed the thigh of the guy next to her, and she whispered something that made him blush. Not when she kissed my cheek like a child being polite at a family reunion. No, I waited. I waited days. Weeks. I smiled. I brought her coffee. I rubbed her back when she pretended to have migraines. And when she left town for a wellness retreat with her yoga instructor and turned her location off. That's when I emptied the joint account. That's when I sold the business. That's when I erased my name from everything that had ever tied me to hers. No text. No note. No closure. Just absence. And 3 years later, when I walked past her table in that rooftop bar, tailored suit, clean cut, someone she clearly didn't recognize for a moment. She looked up like she'd seen a ghost. Wait, Dennis? I stopped. She stood. The same eyes. But not the same confidence. She blinked. Twice. Her voice cracked. How did you? I smiled. 2 words. That's all it took. She dropped to her knees. But we'll get there. This story isn't about her reaction. It's about how I got the power back. And exactly what I found out along the way. She didn't fall apart the day I left. Not when she noticed the empty drawers, or the missing toothbrush, or the quiet that pressed into the house like fog. No. She assumed it was a tantrum. She thought I was being dramatic, again. Maybe out for a beer. Or at my mom's. Maybe sitting in the garage, sulking. She didn't even text that night. And I know because I waited. I wanted to see how long it would take her to care. 43 hours. That's how long it took her to send a single-line message. Where are you? No emoji. No punctuation. Not even my name. I stared at it for a long time. I imagined her standing in the living room, arms crossed, tapping her acrylic nails against the phone, annoyed. Not worried, annoyed. Like I had forgotten to take the trash out. So I blocked her. Everywhere. Phone. Email. Instagram. Even Spotify, because screw her playlists. I took a screenshot of her final message before I hit block, and I set it as my lock screen. Just so I'd never forget how little it took for her to check in. That was the beginning. But not the beginning of my comeback. Not yet. First, I had to rot. The months that followed weren't a montage. They were hell. Not the kind with fire and brimstone. The quiet kind. Where you forget how to sleep. Where your own name sounds fake. Where eating a banana feels like an achievement. I slept in my van for a while. Parked behind a storage facility on the outskirts of town. I told everyone I was taking a break from society. Truth is, I didn't know who I was without her humiliating me. And I didn't have a clue how to function without those tiny breadcrumbs of affection she used to keep me leashed. The worst part? I still missed her. Even after everything. I missed the scent of her shampoo on the pillowcase. The way she'd hum while putting on mascara. The small notes she'd leave in my lunchbox during the early days. Notes she later claimed were embarrassing and cringe. I was pathetic. And I knew it. Then came the night that flipped something. I was parked at the edge of a gas station lot around 2 a.m., drinking cold instant coffee from a thermos I found in the glove box. Some guy came stumbling out of the store, drunk, loud, talking to no one in particular. Yo, you living in that van? He slurred, pointing. I didn't respond. Respect, man. That's freedom. You're off the grid. They can't track you if you don't exist. Then he laughed, hard, and disappeared into the night. And I don't know why, but something about that stuck. They can't track you if you don't exist. That's when the idea hit me. I didn't need to move on. I needed to erase myself, burn everything down, start over, not to become someone else, but to become the version of myself she was never meant to see. It started with the name. Dennis was dead. I pulled out my birth certificate, kept in a folder with some old tax forms, and stared at it. My middle name, Calder. Never liked it. Never used it. Perfect. I became Calder. I opened a new account at a credit union in a neighboring state. Got a P.O. box. Registered as sole proprietorship. I didn't post a single photo. I stopped checking other people's lives. I sold the van. Got a train ticket. Bought 3 black t-shirts and a pair of steel-toe boots. The next time I saw my own reflection, I didn't recognize the man staring back. But he looked like he had a plan. And he did. Because 6 months later, I wasn't fixing dishwashers anymore. I was fixing disasters, corporate IT breaches, ransomware recovery, small businesses brought to their knees by a click on the wrong link. And I was good at it. Freakishly good. Turns out the same attention to detail that made me a boring husband made me an exceptional ghost in the machine. I was finally becoming untouchable. And that's when I saw her again. Not in person. Not yet. But online. She had popped up in a promotional video for some local influencer event. One of those women who win brunches that are really just mimosas and subtle backstabbing. There she was. Callista. Smiling. Radiant. Wearing a fake designer belt and talking about self-love like it was a product she invented. And I felt nothing. That's when I knew I was ready. Next part, I let her find me. But not the way she wanted. I became a riddle she couldn't solve. A man she used to mock. Now someone she couldn't trace. And when she finally looked me in the eyes again, she wouldn't laugh. She'd fall apart. There's something intoxicating about being untraceable. Not in a criminal way. I wasn't living off the grid to break laws. I was doing it to break the pattern. The one where I existed for other people's convenience. The one where I smiled when I was humiliated. The one where I kept showing up to a burning house thinking maybe this time the fire would be warm instead of fatal. I didn't disappear because I was broken. I disappeared because it was the only way to rebuild without her fingerprints all over the blueprint. And now I was back. Not in her world. Just within reach. Like a smudge in the corner of her eye she couldn't quite wipe away. It started with a mistake. Hers. She commented on a viral clip, something about relationships and emotional intelligence. Her username was tied to her business account now, of course. She wasn't hiding. Why would she? She thought I was gone, buried in the past like one of her ex-boyfriends she joked about during wine nights. But I wasn't. I created a burner. Commented just below her. One line. Innocent on the surface, but only she would understand it. Do they still laugh when you say safe? It was a surgical strike. She replied publicly with a laughing emoji. But 10 minutes later, the comment was deleted. 2 hours after that, she posted a story with a quote about releasing the past and choosing peace. She was rattled. Good. It wasn't revenge yet. This was just foreplay. The next step was making myself visible, just enough to make her question everything. I didn't contact her. Didn't even go near her social circle. That would have been amateur hour. No, I planted breadcrumbs. A 5-star review on her business's website from someone named C.D. complimenting her grace under pressure. A fake LinkedIn profile with a pixelated photo and a job title that mirrored her father's old position, one she still bragged about inheriting the grit from. A Spotify playlist that she once made for us, reposted by a random user, with a single new song added. Cold Little Heart. She noticed. I could tell. Her page went private. Her post slowed down. And eventually, I got the ultimate confirmation. One of her old co-workers reached out to me on my business email, which had no connection to my old name, asking if I'd be open to cybersecurity consulting for a PR firm downtown. Her firm. She was fishing, trying to confirm if the man circling her world was me. But she couldn't, because I never used the name Dennis again. I never used our old address. I never even typed her full name. Not once. I was a shadow that had learned to walk in daylight. And the closer she got, the more paranoid she became. One night, I walked past a bakery in Midtown. Late. Empty. I saw her sitting inside, across from a friend. She looked different. Not worse. Just undone. Her posture wasn't weaponized like before. Her hands fiddled with a napkin. She was mid-sentence, but I saw her pause. Her eyes lifted, darted toward the window, like she felt something. She didn't see me. I kept walking. She wouldn't sleep that night. I knew it. Not because she missed me, but because she couldn't own me anymore. Weeks passed. I heard through a back channel, a client who unknowingly mentioned her during a strategy call, that she'd recently started therapy. Apparently, she told people she was dealing with abandonment trauma. Let that sink in. The woman who laughed while publicly stripping me of dignity was now claiming to be the one abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on me. But I didn't hate her. Not in the way people think. My hatred wasn't fiery or loud. It was cold, structural, like replacing the beams in a house she thought she built. She had no idea that every room in her new life had been mapped out by my silence. And she was about to walk into the biggest one. The setup for our final confrontation started with an invitation. Anonymous, of course. A private speaker event. Tech industry. Limited seating. I rented the space under a shell company and made sure her firm got exclusive access to pitch branding services. She was told someone important might attend. Someone whose name she didn't recognize, called her Dean. The initials meant nothing to her. But when I walked in that night, tailored suit, trimmed beard, posture she'd never seen before, her smile froze. She knew. She knew. But she couldn't say it out loud, not in front of her team. So she waited. She watched. She squinted like her eyes were trying to dig through 3 years of change. And when the event ended and people cleared out, and I pretended to check my watch like I was late for something that didn't matter, she approached me. Her voice cracked just a bit. Dennis. I turned, tilted my head, like I was trying to place a face I barely remembered. Then, she whispered, how did you become this? And I said 2 words. Not cruel, not loud, just accurate. But I'm not telling you those words yet. You'll get them when you've earned them. Because the moment I said them, she collapsed into a chair like her skeleton gave up. And we still hadn't even begun the real part of the story. She didn't cry right away. That surprised me. She just sat there, clutching her purse like it was a life vest, blinking more than usual, like her eyes were rebooting. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. And I swear, for a moment, I saw her trying to calculate what version of me this was. Like I was a test question she hadn't studied for. The lights overhead flickered once, timed motion sensors. Everyone else had already left. Even the cleaning staff were in another room. The silence was full-bodied, thick, almost cinematic. And there we were, standing in the center of the room where she used to orbit every conversation like she owned gravity itself. Say that again, she whispered. I didn't. I just smiled. A small one. Not triumphant, not cruel, but solid. Like the final puzzle piece sliding into place. That's when she started breathing differently. Her fingers twitched on the fabric of her purse, and her foot tapped against the floor as if trying to keep her grounded. She leaned in, as if my silence was a code she could crack by proximity. I thought you were, she stopped. Swallowed. I mean, people said you. Like, left the country or something. I didn't respond. I didn't give her anything to anchor to. That's what killed her most. She needed a label to fight, or cry to, or seduce. A name, a role, an ex, a regret. But all she had now was a man with my eyes and none of my softness. Why? She asked finally. Why didn't you just talk to me? And that was the moment I felt the laugh crawl up my throat. Talk. She wanted a conversation. The woman who turned me into a running joke at dinner tables. The woman who said safe, like it was a synonym for useless. The woman who called my old therapist a waste of money when I was having panic attacks from the very arguments she used to enjoy starting. She wanted to talk? Still, I kept it in. The laugh, the rant, the venom, because I'd done the work. I'd gutted the hurt, replaced it with clarity, and I knew that letting her see my fury would hand her back control. Rage is just love that hasn't let go. I wasn't here to let her feel loved, even through hate. I was here to let her feel irrelevant. I stepped around her. Slowly. Not menacing, not dramatic. Just enough for her to have to shift her body to follow me. And then I asked, do you still think I'm safe? The words came out soft. Clean. Her mouth opened. Closed. For a moment, she looked 12 years old. Fragile. Like the type of person who cries at movies and still believes in horoscopes. I didn't mean it like that, she muttered. It was a joke. That phrase. That damn phrase again. It was a joke. Her favorite shield. The excuse that let her say things designed to cut while blaming you for bleeding. I turned back to face her, just as she stood up. I don't hate you, Callista, I said honestly. I just finally realized you only love what you can control. And I'm not yours anymore. The quiet after that was nuclear. She looked down. Her chest was rising and falling like she'd just come out of cold water. Her hands shook. Finally, she sat back down, not dramatically, just softly, like her body gave up pretending to be composed. And then she whispered, "You look like someone I never met." "Good." I said nothing. I left her there. The next 48 hours were chaos, not for me, but for her. I had arranged everything perfectly. Her PR firm had signed up for a 2-month consultation package with my shell company before they ever realized who was behind it. I didn't even need the money. The point was exposure. Because within that package was a network security audit, one that allowed me to legally access her firm's entire digital framework for vulnerabilities. It was all authorized, signed, stamped, and within that, I found everything I needed. Emails to clients in her old flirty tone, personal slander about her employees, and yes, even a thread where she joked about me being probably dead in a ditch somewhere or married to a woman who thinks socks with sandals are hot. I didn't release anything. I didn't have to. I just left a file on her desktop titled Perspective. Inside it, a single sentence. "This is the version of me you created by laughing." No signature. No contact. Just that. I revoked access the same day. They terminated the contract the next morning. But she wasn't done. Callista isn't the type to crumble once. She crumbles in stages. Quietly. Then explosively. Then embarrassingly. I was expecting a smear campaign, a message through a mutual acquaintance, maybe even a tearful voicemail. What I wasn't expecting was what happened next. She showed up at a public event I was scheduled to speak at. Not for tech, but for small business resilience. She stood in the back. Didn't speak. Just watched. And when it ended, she didn't approach me. She approached my assistant. Tried to ask about my schedule. Said she used to know me. Claimed it was urgent. I instructed my assistant to give her a blank look and say, "I'm sorry, he doesn't meet with the public." Public. That one stung. I know it did. Because for the first time, she understood what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. I'll stop here. Not because the story's over, but because the next part is when she does the one thing I truly didn't see coming. And suddenly, the game changes again. There's a difference between someone who's sorry and someone who's scared. I'd seen Callista scared before, mostly when her carefully curated image was under threat. A bad review. A canceled meeting with someone important. A wrinkle she swore wasn't there last week. That kind of fear was performative. Shallow. But what I was about to see now, it wasn't that. It was something deeper, sadder, and far more dangerous. It started with a letter. Not a text. Not a DM. A handwritten, postage-stamped, envelope-sealed letter. It arrived at my business mailbox in a pale blue envelope that reeked of lavender and nostalgia. It felt strange just holding it, like a relic from another timeline. Inside was a folded piece of cream stationery. Her handwriting, familiar and unchanged. The same swirl she used to use when writing "I love you" on napkins. Except now, the words were different. "You probably won't read this, but I didn't know where else to put it. You were never supposed to be the villain in my story. I just didn't know how to love someone who didn't need fixing." That sentence alone made me sit down. She wrote 4 pages, each more honest than I expected, but just vague enough to keep from feeling truly accountable. She talked about her father, emotionally absent. Her first boyfriend cheated on her. Her obsession with being the woman in control because she believed deep down that love was a currency, and whoever owed the least had the power. She admitted she never saw me as weak. She saw me as safe, and she hated herself for wanting that, and punishing me for giving it. By the end of the letter, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt confused, because part of me wanted to burn the letter and move on, proof that I'd officially won. But another part, the part still holding a few cracked bones from our marriage, felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Curiosity. 2 weeks later, I saw her again, not by accident this time. It was a Thursday afternoon. Overcast. I was heading into a small coffee shop near the river. One of those quiet, wood-paneled places where no one knows your name, and the Wi-Fi is always just slightly unreliable. I'd been going there regularly, using it as a workspace away from my now busy office. She was already inside, sitting by the window. No makeup, hair pulled back, wearing a navy sweater I vaguely remembered buying for her during a vacation years ago. She didn't look up when I entered. She was stirring a cup of tea like it had personally offended her. And yet, as if by instinct, her eyes flicked up the moment I stepped in. No surprise. No drama. Just recognition. I should have walked out. But I didn't. I walked over, pulled the chair opposite her, and sat down. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. For nearly a full minute, we just sat there. The clink of her spoon against the mug was the only sound between us. Then, finally, she exhaled and said, "You read it." I nodded once. "I didn't send it to manipulate you," she added quickly, almost defensively. "I know." She stared out the window for a moment. "You look healthy." I gave a short smile. "You look tired." That got a laugh. A genuine one. Soft. No sharp edges. I deserve that. We talked for 17 minutes. Not about us. Not about the past. Just safe things. Weather. Work. An awkwardly long tangent about how oat milk ruins coffee. It felt like two strangers pretending not to share a history full of scar tissue. But as I stood up to leave, she grabbed my wrist, gently, like she was afraid I'd vanish in a vapor if she blinked too long. "Wait," she said. "Can I ask you something real?" I paused. "Sure. If I had changed, like, really changed before you left, do you think we would have made it?" And I swear, for a brief second, my chest cracked open. Because she didn't say it like someone trying to win. She said it like someone who'd been carrying that question like a knife in her throat for years. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to keep my armor on. But something about that moment, raw, fragile, undesigned, made me pause. So I said the most honest thing I could. "Maybe, but I had to leave to find out who I was without you." She let go of my wrist. Slowly. And for the first time, I saw her eyes water. Not for effect, not for control, but because something in her finally cracked that wasn't made of manipulation. But that didn't change anything. I walked out of that cafe knowing exactly who I was. What I didn't know was what she was about to do next. Because 3 days later, I'd get a call from a number I didn't recognize. And the person on the other end would say something that made every thread I thought I'd untangled twist into a knot all over again. I hadn't heard her voice in weeks. Not since the cafe. Not since those 17 strange, fractured minutes where the past sat at the table between us like a ghost that neither of us dared touch. I'd walked away from that meeting convinced I had done the adult thing, that I had risen above the ashes, untethered from her orbit. I told myself I didn't care what she did after that. I even deleted the letter she'd written, telling myself I didn't need it as a trophy or a warning. But then, 3 days later, I got the call. It came in just after midnight. The number was unlisted, the kind that normally meant spam or robocalls or someone desperate enough to hide. I nearly declined it. But something in me, maybe a sliver of old instinct or leftover curiosity, made me answer. "Calder Dean," a voice asked. "Female. Not hers." "Yes. This is Detective Morrow with the 12th Precinct. I'm calling in regard to a woman named Callista Hallow. You're listed in her emergency contacts." I froze. That couldn't be right. I hadn't spoken her full name in years, let alone signed any document that would link me to her in an emergency. "I'm not." I started, but the detective cut in. "She's safe," she said quickly, like she'd read panic in my silence. "She was brought in earlier tonight. Voluntarily. No charges. But she asked for you. Repeatedly." I stood there in the dark, barefoot on the cold tile of my apartment, staring out the window at the empty skyline. She had put my name down. Not her mother's. Not her sister's. Not one of her trendy wine club friends. Me. Why was she brought in? I finally asked. A pause. Papers shuffling. She approached a police cruiser outside a closed pharmacy. Said she thought she was being followed. She was crying, disoriented, said she hadn't slept in 3 days. No signs of substance use, but we felt it was safest to take her in for a wellness check. A wellness check. I didn't know what to do with that. It would have been so easy to hang up. To remind the officer that I wasn't her husband anymore. To say I had no legal obligation. To pretend I hadn't just felt something hollow open in my chest at the idea of her. The woman who once stood on tables to humiliate me, now unraveling in front of strangers. Instead, I asked for the address. I didn't rush. I moved slowly, methodically. I dressed in silence, pulled my coat over my shoulders, and took the long route to the station. Every red light was a moment to think, or maybe avoid thinking. I wasn't going for her. I told myself that repeatedly. I was going for closure, for confirmation, to see, once and for all, that I had climbed out of the wreckage she left me in, and that she was still crawling through it. But when I got there, when I walked into that sterile fluorescent lobby, and saw her curled up on a hard bench, knees to chest, eyes raw and unfocused. All that logic crumbled. She looked nothing like the woman who used to own every room she entered. She looked like someone who had been speaking to shadows in her head for hours and didn't trust any of them. The officer nodded toward her. She's lucid now. You can talk to her, if you'd like. We've got her signed out under a wellness release. She doesn't need hospitalization, but she shouldn't be alone tonight. She has people, I replied. The officer raised an eyebrow. Apparently not. She noticed me as I sat beside her. Didn't flinch. Didn't speak. Just slowly turned her head and blinked like her eyes were adjusting to someone real. I'm not here to save you, I said gently. I didn't ask you to, she whispered. For a while, we just sat there. She didn't explain what happened. I didn't ask. It was like two veterans from different wars sitting on the same bench, too tired to swap stories. But then, out of nowhere, she said something that knocked the air out of me. I see you in my dreams. But you don't speak. You just watch, like you're waiting for me to drown. I said nothing. She looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. I kept trying to laugh it off. The business problems, the dating disasters, the friendships fading. I thought I could rebuild without regret. But it always comes back to you. To that night at Neptune's. To that stupid shrimp. That joke. Your face. It stunned me, how vivid her memory still was. I'd assumed she'd buried it. That I was a paragraph in her memoir at best. But she remembered every detail. And not because she missed me. Because something about that night haunted her, too. She asked to go somewhere quiet. Somewhere warm. I didn't take her to my place. That would have sent the wrong message to both of us. Instead, I drove her to a late-night diner on the edge of town. Empty booths. Black coffee. A jukebox that hadn't worked in decades. She sat across from me and stirred her tea exactly 5 times before speaking again. Tell me honestly, she said. Was I ever enough? I nearly laughed. Callista, you were too much. That was always the problem. No, she snapped. Not too much like dramatic. I mean, was I ever enough for you? As I was. Before the cruelty. Before the control. That was the first time I realized something terrifying. She wasn't asking for validation. She was asking if her love was ever real. And I didn't have the heart to lie. I think you wanted to love me, I said quietly. But you were always more in love with being admired than being understood. And I was too willing to play the fan instead of the partner. She closed her eyes. One tear. Just one. She wiped it quickly. And then she whispered, I never stopped admiring you. I just hated how small you made me feel when you started growing without me. I didn't respond. Because how do you comfort someone who's finally telling the truth at the exact moment it no longer matters? We sat in that empty diner until the sky started turning gray. No one came in. No one bothered us. The waitress didn't ask questions, just kept refilling our mugs with bitter coffee that neither of us drank. It was the kind of silence that didn't demand filling, because too many words had already gone unspoken for too long. And then, somewhere between 4 and 5 a.m., Callista pulled out a piece of folded paper from her coat. I recognized the crease immediately, the way the edges curled inward, like it had been opened and closed 100 times. It was another letter. But this one wasn't for me. I wrote it, she said quietly, sliding it across the table, in case you never showed up again. I wasn't planning to give it to you. I was going to burn it. But I think you should read it anyway. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, I asked, what changed? She looked out the window, tapping her fingers against the ceramic mug like she was keeping rhythm with something only she could hear. I got tired of being angry at a version of you that doesn't exist anymore, she said. For a long time, I needed you to be the villain so I could survive the guilt. So I could say to myself, he abandoned me. He ghosted me. He was cruel. But you weren't. You were precise, quiet, strategic, which made it worse, honestly, because it forced me to ask questions I'd spent my whole life avoiding. She paused, then added, like why I need to destroy the things that love me. That hit harder than it should have. Because beneath all the walls I'd built, beneath the structure of the revenge and reinvention, there was still a part of me that had once memorized every freckle on her shoulder. A part that knew the exact way her breath hitched when she was about to cry, and how she used sarcasm to deflect any real emotion that made her feel smaller than she wanted to be. But I stayed silent. Because this moment wasn't about digging back into the ruins. This was something else entirely. She continued, I know I don't get to ask for anything. I know that even being here, talking to you is more than I deserve. But there's something I want to try, not for us, not for reconciliation, but because I need to stop being the person who keeps wounding just to feel in control. I leaned back slightly, watching her carefully. What does that mean? She held my gaze. Firm. Steady. I want to apologize. Properly. Not to win you back. Not to clear my conscience. But because I need to learn how to be accountable without needing to be forgiven. That sentence hung in the air like a challenge. Not to me, to herself. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was across from the woman who broke me. I felt like I was across from the woman I once thought I could build a life with. Raw, scared, stripped of all the noise and theater. It was unsettling, disarming, maybe even dangerous. Because when someone stops trying to win, you start seeing who they really are. I finally picked up the letter. It wasn't long. Maybe 3 paragraphs. No grand poetic metaphors. No manipulation buried under apology. Just truth. She named what she did. She didn't soften it. She didn't justify it. She wrote, "You were never boring. I was just addicted to chaos. And I made your stillness into a crime because I didn't know how to sit with my own silence." She ended it with a single line. This isn't a request. It's a reckoning. I folded it, slid it back to her, and said, "Keep it. You'll need to read it more than I will." We walked out together just after sunrise. The streetlights were still blinking like they couldn't decide if the night was truly over. I offered to call her a ride, but she declined. Said she wanted to walk, to clear her head, to prove to herself that she didn't need someone to swoop in anymore. I watched her cross the street. She didn't look back. Not once. That part was new. And for a while, I just stood there, watching the sky bleed from ash to blue, wondering what the hell this all meant. Because now, for the first time since disappearing from her world, I wasn't angry. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't even proud of how far I'd come. I was just tired. Tired of hating her. Tired of needing her to suffer to validate my healing. Tired of wearing armor I didn't need anymore. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about whether she deserved a second chance. It was about whether I could walk forward without dragging her shadow behind me. Later that day, I received an email. No subject line. No message. Just a link. A YouTube video. Private. Unlisted. It was her. In a dimly lit room. No makeup. No edits. Looking directly into the camera. And saying the words I never thought I'd hear her say. Words not meant for me, but for everyone she had ever manipulated, hurt, minimized, controlled, including herself. But what she didn't know was that someone else had already seen it before me. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. And they were about to show up in my life again. With news I never expected. And a secret she thought she'd buried with me. The email came on a Sunday. The kind of day built for stillness. Coffee on the balcony. Unread books on the armrest. A sky so blue it almost felt dishonest. I hadn't been thinking about her. Not actively. I was rebuilding a shelving unit, drinking cold brew, listening to a jazz playlist I didn't even realize had started to grow on me. The version of myself who used to wait by the phone would have never recognized this man. The email had no message, just a subject line. We should talk. It's not what you think. It was from her sister, Emily. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. Last I knew, she had moved to Chicago, started a marketing job, blocked out most of her family like it was a bad TV show she didn't want to binge anymore. I hovered my finger over the delete key, but I didn't press it. I opened the email. It was short, direct, and disarming in a way I wasn't prepared for. I saw the video Callista made. It's not a stunt. I've seen her fake before. This wasn't it. She's trying. I don't know if it matters anymore. Maybe it's too late. But there's something she never told you. Something I think you have the right to know. She included her number. My hands hesitated over the keyboard, over the phone, over every nerve in my body. I didn't want more twists. I didn't want a final betrayal. But some part of me, maybe the part that had let her back into my head just a little too far, needed to know. So I called. Emily answered on the first ring. No small talk. No formalities. She was pregnant, she said. The month before you disappeared. I felt the breath leave me. Not sharply. More like a quiet deflation. Like a room slowly leaking air. What? I asked, barely able to speak. She found out late. She was going to tell you after your anniversary dinner. But then, that night happened. The joke. The party. You vanished. And she never told you. She miscarried 3 weeks later. Stress. Guilt. I don't know. She told me not to tell anyone. I didn't agree, but I respected her choice. Until now. I sat down on the edge of the couch. My hands felt foreign. My voice came out like it belonged to someone else. I would have stayed, I said quietly. If I had known, I never would have left. I think that's why she didn't tell you, Emily replied. Because staying out of obligation would have been worse for both of you. And maybe she wanted you to leave clean, before everything broke. I didn't call Callista that day, or the next. I went to the park. I watched a man teach his daughter how to ride a bike. I helped an elderly woman pick up spilled groceries. I ate alone. I slept without dreams. It wasn't grief. Not entirely. It was something deeper, a quiet acceptance that we were both characters in each other's origin stories. Not villains. Not heroes. Just beginnings. But eventually, I sent her one final message. Simple. Honest. No demands. I heard. I'm sorry for your loss. I hope you find peace. She replied 2 days later. I'm trying. Thank you for being part of the reason I believe I still can. 6 months passed. I took on fewer clients. Started writing again. I published a short piece under a pseudonym, an essay about silence, about vanishing, about the cost of revenge when it comes dressed as survival. It got shared. A few people reached out, said it helped them leave something they'd been stuck in for years. That meant more to me than any business contract ever had. I met someone too. Not a whirlwind romance. Nothing loud or cinematic. Just a slow-growing comfort. A bookstore meet-cute that turned into coffee, then conversation, then weekends spent reading and shared quiet. Her name's Elise. She doesn't ask about my past unless I offer. She laughs with me, not at me. And she never makes me feel like I have to perform to be worth loving. One night, while walking home under a soft rain, she asked me the strangest question. If you could say just 2 words to the person who hurt you most, what would they be? I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't come from pride or bitterness or even memory, but from being far enough away from the fire to finally feel warm. I looked up at the sky, then at her, and I said, "Thank you." She raised an eyebrow, curious. "That's it." I nodded. "That's it." Because it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about growing in the ashes without needing to throw them at anyone. And finally, I had.